Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. My name's Dennis. So I have a very interesting computer problem. Power went out, power failure basically, and so I never turned it on for a long time after that, never thought anything of it. Turned it on and it would turn on and power off. And so I switched power supplies thinking that's what it was. So as you see in the video, I wound up switching everything out, even the CPU. None of that worked. Swapping memory, switching graphics cards, CPU, the whole gambit. I'm at the point where I'm sure it has to be the motherboard. But something interesting happens. So the computer is coming on, getting to Windows and shutting off. This is how I solve it. Hope it'll help you out. It's really, really interesting. So I'll help you watch because it helps me a lot. Here we go. So here's the computer in question. So when I hit the power button, you'll see what happens. It'll turn on, everything comes on, looks like it's all okay. It'll start to boot, it seems like everything's going to go okay. And then after a few seconds, power's off and shuts down. Now there's a few things that could be. Could be that the stock cooler is just not working anymore to keep it cool. But my first thought is it's probably the power supply. So that's what I'm going to start with because that's the most likely cause. Even though it does start up, doesn't mean anything. It just doesn't have enough juice to keep it going. So I'm going to do that and then we'll go from there. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, and I have done, is I'm going to have a new power supply. That's the Dark Power 13, 850 watt power supply. I've got the power connected to it. I connected the CPU and the power. So rather than tear everything out trying to diagnose things, let's start with the power supply. Connect the two main things. We're going to turn it on and see if it stays on. If it does, it'll be a short video because that'll be all there is to it. So let's see what happens. Oh. Helps you if you turn it on. Okay, so let's see what happens. Okay, so it's getting its power again. Now I'm not going to get a screen or nothing because I don't have anything plugged in. I just want to see if it stays on. Nope, it's doing the same thing. Nope, okay. So basically what we've established is it's not the power. Because it's doing the exact same thing as it was doing before. So, where do we go from there? Well, I'm going to have to check and see. First, I'm going to check all our connectors down here. Maybe something came loose. Maybe something came off. Well, let's start with that. Graphics card is possibly an issue. Oh, you know what? It actually is because I didn't connect the graphics card. Okay. I've tested it, it stays on. I didn't change the power for the graphics card, so that's not going to work. So we're going to change that out just to verify, and then we'll come back and try one more time. Okay, so we're going to try this one more time. Make sure the power supply is on, and we're going to turn it on. And of course, I did switch the graphics card power, so we should get an output if everything is now working. Makes for a very short video when I can quickly diagnose it like that. But, so it is staying on. Okay, so that's interesting. So before it stayed on, but it's saying it's got no signal, even though it's definitely plugged in, and I definitely have power going to it. So, see what happened with this is we had a power spike, like a bunch of them, like back to back to back, on and off, on and off, on and off. Don't know why utilities do that, but they screw a lot of equipment when they do that. I lost a fridge that way, I've lost a freezer that way, and maybe the graphics card's gone. So that'll be the next step. Since everything was turning on before, it's not now. So possibly, although I don't think that's it. Anyway, we're going to swap it out and see. So, something very curious is going on. Have a new power supply, CPU, power, and I've connected the graphics card. When I turn it on, comes on, so everything seems to be okay. I even get Windows starting to load, and then it shuts down. So I'm one step closer, but don't know why. The power from the motherboard it's an NVMe drive, so once it boots up, it should stay on. So anyhow, we're going to try one more time just to try and show you what's going on. So watch the screen on the left there and see if we get to the Windows login screen. Okay, so it's going to take a second and it's going to come on. There, gets to the BIOS. Oh, and now it's doing an automatic repair. But it's not getting there because something is shutting it down. Alright, so if you've had an issue like this, stay tuned because we're going to figure out what it is. Okay, so the really interesting part here, because I was getting to the BIOS, I could see it real quick. I hit the delete key, it takes me into the BIOS, and the system's running. Okay, so something really strange. I've never seen that before. So I don't have a mouse connected, so I can't play around, but we're going to do that. But one thing I can check is our CPU fan is going. Okay, our voltages seem to be okay. Temperatures seem to be okay. It's reporting memory. Now the BIOS is older. XMP is disabled, which is why I'm not really sure. Maybe back then I didn't know what to do. So anyhow, so this gets us one step further in the testing process. So I'm just going to leave it for a little bit and see if it stays on while I contemplate maybe updating the BIOS. But I don't really want to do that because if I do that and the system powers off, well, then I just brick the motherboard. So I can't do that first. But I am going to see what I can discover from in here once I hook up a mouse and play around a little bit more. So at this point, I think it's safe to say that there could be one other issue I hadn't thought of, because we know when I power it up, it'll stay on for a little bit and power itself down. Now, because I was able to change the XMP memory, because the BIOS, I was able to boot to the BIOS, and changing the power supply really didn't have much of an effect at all. I don't think it's the power. I think it's possible it's the case, because on the back of this case, and I'll try and show you that, there's another little department in here, or compartment, and it connects to the battery, and I never really liked it from the beginning, but I think that's what it could be. So I think what I'm going to wind up doing is I'm going to have a look at that and see if there's something wrong there, and if I can't figure that out, I'm going to take the motherboard out, put it on my test bench, and see what happens when it's not in the case, just to find out. So yeah, I'm going to try and have a look at the inside. There's a power switch on the inside down in here. So I play with that a little bit, but you can't really see it until I take, I think this one, if I remember right, comes off. So I'm going to have a better look at it and see if it could be the case itself. And then we'll move on to explore other things. So I thought I'd try something, since I'm going to take it out of the case anyway, is I took all the screws out of these places here, right? Because if I remember right, they said that this can be used as a standalone test bench. So I'm going to find out if it can. So this is sitting there. Let's see. Is there something else fastening on? So we're going to disconnect everything, cut all these cables, get everything off, and then I'll show you too when I'm done. Okay, so I got this out and I wanted to show you first this here. So on the inside, let me just tip this if I can. I don't know if you can see that or not, but anyway, you've got this little cable here. This is like a power cable, goes to the back, and this is the way they built it in, and then your power supply sits in here, and it has that gap. I never really cared for that in the beginning, and when I pushed this just now, it went in. Now, it shouldn't have come out in the first place, but it did. So I don't know if that could have been the problem. If I had noticed that first, I would have told you. But what I want to find out right now is, does it actually work? But before I do that, here, this is what came out of the system. Now, this is basically can be used as a test bench. And that's what I'm going to use it for. You got a fan that you can use. You can still put your graphics card in here. On the bottom, it rests on all these rubber feet. So it's not making contact, then it's resting up off of that. And you still have your hub, so you can put that through and use it for fans and RGB, all that kind of good stuff. Okay, I have everything in there now. The one thing I don't have is a thing to turn it on, so I got to get something like that. Bear with me 1 second. So I've connected the power, everything else, our SATA is connected, graphics card, everything's ready to go without the case. So this is basically just a test bench. And I've got everything on it. And it should work. If it doesn't, well, then I have to say we have other issues to discover, which I'm going to have to say because the graphics worked, motherboard seemed to work, I got a BIOS. Memory seemed to be okay. Then I'd have to go with maybe it's overheating, which it didn't seem to be, but we're going to find out. So I'm going to start it up and let's see what happens. Okay, so I'm going to short these two pins. Alright, so let's see what happens. I'm hoping for the best. That was a lot faster than before, but it's still doing it. No way. Wow, okay. That's surprising. So, I tore the case apart for nothing. That's okay. But I want it to narrow down. So I'm going to replace the graphics card. And then I'm going to start with memory. And we'll see where we go. It's just that it's weird that it's booting up to Windows. And I'm seeing it get to Windows. So what's causing the issue? If it was memory, it wouldn't even boot up. If it was motherboard, we wouldn't get that far. Something's causing it to power down. I don't know what it is. Okay, so I changed out the graphics card. And I put new memory in. Still having the same issues. So I think it's time to... I think CPU's got to be overheating or something. Because it fires all the way up, gets to Windows, and then boots down. I mean, otherwise I would want to say it was some kind of an update that caused this, but... So, you know what? Actually, what I'm going to do before I do the CPU, I'm going to disconnect the operating system. I'm going to put a different, brand new drive on there. I'm going to start it up with that. And I'm going to see if I can install Windows onto it. If it lets me do that, well, then it's not the CPU. And it's not the cooler, because it could be the cooler. Alright, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put an NVMe drive in there. Although I think there's one in there already, but it doesn't have an operating system on it. So this is going to take me a little bit of changing things around. Disconnect the SATA SSD, which is what I had originally. And then put the an NVMe drive in there. And see if that works. Okay, so I've removed all of the drives. Just want to get everything down to just a brand new drive and see what happens. So we're going to boot it up. If it's working right, everything is working. What I should get is I've got a Windows OS USB key in there. If it tries to boot from that, then I'm going to say it's going to work. But we'll see if the system continues and lets it do that. So let's start this up again. Alright, so we're looking at the screen to see what we get. Okay, we're going to the BIOS. And it should recognize the USB drive in a minute here and try to install it. But you know what? It's staying on longer than before. which is telling me that that's exactly what's going on. Is I've had multiple power failures, and maybe one of those drives has died. Maybe the operating system drive itself has died. One of those is causing a conflict, so I'm just going to have to wait and see. It's not picking up the USB, or it is. Maybe it's just taking a while, so we'll come back here in a little bit once it's doing that. But the fact that it's staying powered on, everything is running. I have something on the screen, which is an indicator to me that it is reading the USB drive, and should come up here, ask me to install Windows. There we go. Oh, and it stopped. Oh, this is nightmarish. Wow. Okay. Okay, so I have to say it's got to be, the CPU's got to be overheating. Something's gone wrong. So that's going to be my last thing to check, unfortunately. Either something's gone wrong with the CPU, which is highly unlikely, or just the CPU cooler is just no longer working right. Okay, so it's come up, but it's looking for the boot drive. So we're going to put a boot drive in. One thing I did differently is I changed the from the CPU fan to CPU optional fan, just in case that could some remotely make a difference. It's not reading the boot device though, so we're gonna probably have to restart. I think that's what we're gonna do. Okay, so we're restarting it back up, and let's see what happens. The fact that it runs for quite a while, that's what's somewhat interesting, because it stays on longer and longer each time, which is what makes it really strange. Even with the new power supply, it's doing the same thing as the previous one, so not exactly sure what's going on here. I'm not getting anything on the screen this time though, which is odd. So I'm just going to wait and come back. We'll see how long this takes before it either fails to do anything or shuts down. Which, okay, it shut down. Very, very strange. Okay, so I'm going to take the CPU cooler off and replace it and see what happens. 33 degrees, which is what I would expect with the... I took the stock cooler off. I put the Hyper 212 Evo on there, the Black Edition RGB. But here's the other thing. Now that I've put the CPU cooler on there, which I'll show you here. So that's the Hyper 212. And now that that's on there, everything is running. So, well, I tried everything. Swapped CPUs, memory, graphics cards, power supplies, everything. Couldn't get it running. As you can see, it's running now. You're not going to believe what it was that made it happen. It was in the BIOS. Somehow, there is a feature in there, and this took me a lot of looking around to find, called the C state. This is called the global C state in the BIOS. As you can see, everything is working. It's trying to load different drivers. It's got a new NVIDIA driver, all that kind of stuff. But I want to show you, in case you ever run into this problem, system is loading up and shutting down. Gets to the diagnosis, it's trying to diagnose it, it's trying to repair it, shuts down every time. Every indication, it's the power supply. However, that's not what it was. This is what it was. I'm going to reboot. We're going to go into BIOS. I'm going to show you exactly what caused all this grief. To the point where I thought it was the CPU, so I just changed the CPU even. And that's not what it is at all. But the beauty of this, everything's working, and I'm a happy camper again. So let's go into the BIOS and let me show you what caused all this confusion. Okay, we're in the BIOS. We're under Tweaker. Okay, right up here. Now this is a Gigabyte motherboard. And under CPU Advanced Settings. So Advanced CPU Settings. I double clicked it there. And there's a thing in here called a Global C State Control. I went in and disabled it. That's all it took. I've done so many things in the BIOS looking around trying to fix this. It wasn't until I discovered that. So if you're having a problem with your system turning on and turning off and you just can't get into Windows, try disabling this. I'm not saying this will work for you, but it worked for me. So it's at your own risk, of course, anytime you do anything in the BIOS. But this saved my bacon. Because I honestly thought I was going to have to get another motherboard yet again. So the motherboard that I had a while back that might not have been working, it's possible that it could have been this. So when you go in here, again, global C-state control, all right, if yours is enabled or auto, try disabling it. And I hope it helps you out. All right, so interesting video to be sure. The global C-state, never heard of it before in my entire life. Built multiple computers, multiple computers that I've fixed issues with. This one had me stumped until it just happened. I mean, I had to search it out a lot to try and find out what could be going wrong. A lot of them will tell you, oh, go to the safe mode and do all these other things. But none of that worked because I couldn't get the system to stay on long enough. So this global C-state power option, whatever it is, that was causing me all my issues. So now that that's disabled, everything's working. I'm updating, Windows updates, the whole gambit. So if you're having this issue and you just can't do all these other steps everybody's telling you, try that out. Obviously, it's a BIOS issue. Proceed at your own risk. But if at least you can get to the BIOS, this might just be your salvation. Maybe it's not your motherboard or your graphics card or your memory or any of that. Maybe it's just some BIOS update that happened, and I don't even know how. Obviously, my most obvious thing to think of was a Windows update that somehow triggered that. But to find out for sure, I'm going to have to do a lot more research. But bottom line is, this solved my problem. I hope it solves yours. All right, so if you like the video, hit that like, big old thumbs up. Leave me a comment if you have questions. I'll try as best I can to help you out. If you're new here, think about subscribing. And hit that bell for notifications to see videos as they come up in the future. Thank you for watching. Hope this helped you out. Have a great day. Goodbye.